Have you ever wondered what happened to the Gentiles, people who weren't Israelites, during the time Moses' law was active? Could they be saved, or were they simply forgotten by God? Some teachers today say Gentiles had absolutely no hope until Christ came. But is that really true? Let's explore this together and dig deeper into God's amazing plan. You might hear people quote Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 to 12, where Paul describes Gentiles as without Christ, strangers from the covenants of promise, and having no hope. At first glance, that sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it? But remember, reading the Bible means understanding the big picture, not just single verses. So let's unpack this carefully. First, we need to understand this. The law of Moses was specifically given to the Israelites, not to everyone else. Imagine a school rulebook meant only for one school. You wouldn't expect kids from other schools to follow it, would you? Similarly, the Gentiles weren't expected to follow Moses' law unless they chose to become Israelites themselves or lived among them. But here's the good news. God always had a plan for everyone. Gentiles who chose to worship God had clear guidelines on how to live peacefully among the Israelites. Think about Ruth. She was from Moab, not Israel. But Ruth chose to follow God wholeheartedly, famously saying, "Your people shall be my people and your God, my God." Because of her faithful decision, she joined the Israelite family, eventually becoming part of Jesus' own ancestry. Or consider Uriah the Hittite. He wasn't an Israelite either, but he faithfully served God and King David with courage, loyalty, and honor. Would God forget people like Ruth and Uriah? Certainly not. Even outside Israel, Gentiles weren't left without guidance. The Bible clearly says in Daniel chapter 4, verses 25 to 26, that God rules over all nations. Think about this. If God rules, there must be some law he expects everyone to follow. Otherwise, it's just chaos. Just like your family probably has rules everyone knows about, God's family, the entire world, also had guidelines that were known, even to non-Israelites. God wasn't only interested in the Israelites. He cared for every human heart seeking him. Consider the story of Jonah. Remember the people of Nineveh? They weren't Israelites, yet God sent Jonah to warn them about their wickedness. Initially reluctant, Jonah finally obeyed, and what happened next was incredible. The Ninevites listened carefully, realized their wrongs, repented genuinely, and God forgave them, saving their city from destruction. Clearly, Gentiles weren't doomed to hopelessness. God gave them real chances and meaningful choices too. Then there's the Gentile Queen of Sheba, who traveled far just to hear Solomon's wisdom, God's wisdom. Her dedication showed a heart truly seeking truth. Rahab from Jericho, though once a sinful woman, chose courageously to help God's people. The Bible clearly tells us she was justified, meaning God declared her righteous. Would God justify someone without hope? Never. Rahab's faith was real, and God's mercy was just as real. And what about Job? He wasn't an Israelite, yet he worshipped God passionately, offered sacrifices sincerely, and confidently spoke of his Redeemer. Job lived a righteous life under a law that predated and continued alongside Moses' law, often called the Patriarchal Law. Another compelling example is Moses' own father-in-law Jethro, who worshipped God as a Midianite priest. Jethro offered sacrifices to God and praised him openly. Would God suddenly abandon him when the law of Moses appeared? That's hard to imagine, isn't it? Here's the key. God's ultimate promise to Abraham was for all nations, Genesis 12 verse 3. That means Gentiles were always part of God's bigger plan. Ephesians 2 isn't saying no Gentile ever had hope. It's highlighting that without Christ and without God's covenant, people truly are without lasting hope. But even long before Christ arrived, God always provided ways for sincere Gentiles to find him, live right, and look forward with hope to a coming Savior. The real heart of this message is beautifully simple. God is fair, loving, and just. He never abandons sincere seekers, no matter when or where they live. Whether through Moses' law for Israel, the Patriarchal Law for others, or now through Christ, God has consistently reached out to humanity. Remember Balaam, the prophet from Moab. He wasn't an Israelite either, yet God spoke through him to announce the coming Messiah. Clearly, God communicated his truth beyond the borders of Israel. Also, consider the inhabitants of Gibeon. Though they were servants within Israel, they were treated fairly and even protected by King David when unjustly attacked. Would God consider such acts meaningless? Absolutely not. These stories teach us clearly that God's compassion and fairness are universal. Sacrificial practices existed outside of Israel too, accepted by God himself. Job offered sacrifices faithfully on behalf of his family, and Jethro did the same. If sacrifices were accepted, it means there was a known law or understanding between God and these Gentiles. God would not accept offerings randomly. These actions had meaning, purpose, and approval. So, were Gentiles truly without hope during Moses' time? Absolutely not. God never left any sincere seeker in darkness. His love, wisdom, and justice always stretched far beyond any national borders. Isn't it comforting to know that God's grace and fairness have never depended on nationality or race, but have always relied on genuine faith and sincere obedience? Let's keep exploring the Bible together, remembering that God's great plan has room for everyone, including you, me, and anyone else who seeks him with an honest heart. Isn't it wonderful to realize how wide and deep God's love truly is?